The Department of Homeland Security is asking the Pentagon for help in removing migrants illegally in the U.S. from the country. And Oklahoma's new academic standards will require students to be able to identify, quote, discrepancies in the 2020 election results. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. President Trump is completing his Mideast trip today. He spent the past week meeting with Gulf Arab leaders and striking multi-billion-dollar defense and tech deals. But NPR's Aya Batrawi reports Trump leaves the region with the war in Gaza still flaring.
Trump's Mideast visit began just after Hamas released the last living American-Israeli hostage held in Gaza. Hamas says it did so on the understanding the U.S. would call for a permanent ceasefire and push for aid to enter Gaza. Instead, while in the region, Trump appeared to double down on his idea that Palestinians in Gaza should be permanently relocated outside the territory, saying the U.S. should get involved there and make it a, quote, freedom zone. He then said his administration is looking at people starving in Gaza under Israel's total blockade, saying, we've got to get that taken care of, without elaborating. His comments come as Israel says it struck more than 100 Hamas sites in recent days, and attacks that have killed hundreds, including entire families. Aya Batrawi, NPR News, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Representatives from Ukraine and Russia are in Istanbul, Turkey. They're supposed to be holding direct negotiations about ending Russia's war in Ukraine. Expectations for success are low after Russian President Vladimir Putin did not attend. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Turkey, but he's not at these talks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is there. NPR's Michelle Kelman reports he's sounding pessimistic about the negotiations.
Secretary Rubio says President Trump is impatient and wants the war to end, but the Kremlin balked at the idea of high-level talks with Ukraine, so now Rubio is talking about a one-on-one between Presidents Trump and Vladimir Putin.
I think he's ready to have that engagement and determine once and for all if there's a path forward and what that path is. And it's my assessment that I don't think we're going to have a breakthrough here until the president and President Putin interact directly on this topic.
Rubio sounded disappointed that the Russians sent a low-level team to Turkey, so he doesn't expect much to come out of the talks in Istanbul. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The star witness in the federal sex trafficking trial against rapper Sean "Diddy" Combs may return to the stand today. Cassie Ventura has been cross-examined by Combs' defense team, as NPR's Isabella Gomez Sarmiento reports. A note, this report contains description of sexual activity.
For 2 days, Cassie Ventura testified about the violence and control that she says dominated her relationship with Sean Combs. This allegedly included forcing Ventura into drug-fueled, highly orchestrated sexual performances with male escorts. Combs faces charges that include sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution. His defense says he did not commit these crimes. In cross-examination of Ventura, the defense relied heavily on text messages she exchanged with Combs over the years. Ventura read out messages in which she agreed to or planned logistics for those sexual encounters. The defense is trying to suggest that she willingly consented to the sexual activity. Isabella Gomez Sarmiento, NPR News.
The Department of Homeland Security is asking the Pentagon to provide some 20,000 National Guard troops to help in removing migrants illegally in the U.S. The New York Times was the first to report the story. NPR's Tom Bowman reports military lawyers are reviewing the request.
There's no sense at this point what role the Guard troops would play. It might be providing transportation or security, or if they would be detaining migrants or actually maybe taking part in arrests. This would be the first time Guard troops at the national level have been asked to assist in deportations.
NPR's Tom Bowman reporting. Air traffic controllers at another airport have experienced a communications blackout for well over a minute, this time in Colorado. NPR's Jacqueline Diaz reports this comes on the heels of several outages at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey.
Multiple radio transmitter failures left pilots flying into Denver International Airport on Monday unable to communicate with air traffic controllers. The outage lasted for about 2 minutes, hitting the Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center in Longmont, Colorado. That's according to Frank McIntosh, an official with the Federal Aviation Administration, who shared the details in testimony before a House committee hearing this week. Local reports in Denver claimed the outage lasted for 6 minutes. McIntosh said those reports were, quote, over-exaggerated. Planes were able to remain at safe distances in the sky during the outage. Jacqueline Diaz, NPR News.
Fluoride will soon be banned in Florida's public water systems under a bill signed into law yesterday. From member station WUSF, Douglas Soul has more.
Governor DeSantis says the restriction allows Floridians to choose whether they use fluoride.
Yes, use fluoride for your teeth, that's fine, but forcing it into the water supply is basically forced medication.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has concerns that ingesting fluoride can cause health problems. But dental groups are adamant that low levels of the mineral only have health positives, preventing cavities, especially for those without regular access to care. Florida's ban begins on July 1st. A similar law in Utah, the first state to target fluoride, took effect earlier this month. For NPR News, I'm Douglas Soul in Tallahassee.
There are new academic standards in Oklahoma. These require Oklahoma students to identify, quote, discrepancies in the 2020 election results. Beth Wallace reports the policy is going into effect, although there were no major discrepancies substantiated in the 2020 presidential election.
The standards have been championed by Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction and a conservative firebrand.
These new standards will ensure that kids have an accurate and comprehensive view of historical events, while also reinforcing the values that make our country great.
While Republican leadership raised concerns about a rushed procedure to get the standards through the State Board of Education, the content of the standards has gotten little pushback from the majority party. A lawsuit filed by a former GOP Oklahoma Attorney General could stall the implementation of the standards, which are set to take effect next school year. But like other Republican criticisms, the lawsuit takes issue with how the standards were approved, not the standards themselves. For NPR News, I'm Beth Wallace.
The WNBA season tips off tonight. The league is looking to build on last year's historic season. That's when ratings and attendance were up. NPR's Becky Sullivan has this preview.
The first game will include the debut of the hyped rookie Paige Beckers, who just last month won the NCAA title with her UConn Huskies. She was just chosen first overall in the draft by the Dallas Wings, who will take on last year's league runner-up in the Minnesota Lynx and their MVP candidate, Nafisa Collier. On Saturday, there are two marquee games. First, a heavyweight matchup between the New York Liberty, the defending champs, and the Las Vegas Aces, the great team they knocked out en route to their title last season. Then, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever will take on Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky. The WNBA has extended the regular season from 40 to 44 games, and the league has added a 13th team, the Golden State Valkyries, whose first game is Friday night. Becky Sullivan, NPR News.
People going to the beach in Florida this year will need to watch out for record levels of smelly seaweed. It's called Sargassum. Researchers say there's been a record amount of it in the Atlantic Ocean. It's piling up on beaches and could drive away tourists. This is NPR.